back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Now we have a comprehensive anti-doping workshop. This is the heart of our anti-doping focus at IORC 2026 in collaboration with the World Anti-Doping Agency and the National Anti-Doping Agency. Anti-doping is not merely about testing, it is about education, prevention, research, and creating a culture of integrity. With RRU developing India's newest WADA-accredited anti-doping laboratory and with India's growing role in international sports, this workshop is absolutely crucial for all of us. Let us now begin with our opening keynote. We are honored to welcome Professor Yannis Pitsiladis from Hong Kong Baptist University. Professor Pitsiladis is one of the world's most distinguished researchers in exercise science, human performance, genetics, and anti-doping. His research has directly influenced WADA policies, testing methodologies, and anti-doping education programs globally. You may start.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to begin by also thanking our host, Professor Utsef, who, at his opening speech, if you remember, those of you who were here, I said to him afterwards, I was so impressed that if he does 50%, just 50% of what he's promised, this will be the center of how to prepare for a games, how to run a games, and the legacy of the games. So fabulous. If you do 100%, wow. And so I've got quite a difficult, let's say, task, which is to try and illustrate to you the biggest, what I believe from a personal journey, the biggest threat to getting the games and to the successful games and to the legacy of the games. And try and convince you that there's a threat, but also that, like lots of threats, there are opportunities. Opportunities to rebrand your nation in terms of sport and to be a flagship for other countries wanting to host games. So that's my task today. I have too many slides, so I'm going to be looking at my time very carefully, and I may jump over some if I'm running late. But let's get started because I have a big story to tell you. Help me? The slides are not passing. Oh, it is now. Okay, so we all heard of the last few days, the bid by this region, by India, and many, many people are excited about it. We heard yesterday from the Vice Chancellor, from the Vice President of the Olympic Committee, that maybe 90% of your country is excited about that. That's amazing. At the same time, on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the perception globally of India potentially hosting those games. And this doesn't work as a pointer, but I'll read it for you. IOC has reportedly flagged concerns over India's governance, doping rates, and low medal counts. I've been very fortunate that I'm in the middle of the program, and the governance has been dealt with so beautifully, and I've learned a lot. Thank you, speakers. Really, really fantastic. And that's not my expertise, so ask me nothing about governance. The experts are here. But in terms of doping and anti-doping and achieving medals, that's my expertise. I've been working anti-doping for over 20 years, and I've helped Olympians get gold medals, break records throughout my career. I won't count them, but there's many. So I understand very well what makes an athlete tick. That's what I do. I travel the world, I try to understand elite athletes, and I try and maximize their performance without doping. That's what I do, that's what I know. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. And Professor Utsef's allowed me to be a little bit provocative, but honest with you at the same time, because I really want this to help you. Or else what's the point of just saying everything is wonderful? I think so. But this next slide, oh, there it is. There are two slides that I want you to even photograph, the ones that I want you to remember. This is one of them, okay? And I actually created this using ChatGPT, putting in all the information on the internet. And as you know, 50% of what's in the internet is wrong. We don't know which 50%. But generally speaking, these facts are right. And you can read it for yourself. India leads the world in doping violations, a crisis hidden in plain sight. 260 positive tests in 2024, highest positive rate among major sporting nations. First over China, USA, Russia, not to offend anyone. And you're bidding for Olympic Games. Do you see the problem? Do you see the problem? Okay, those numbers are incredible. But don't worry, hopefully by the end of the workshop, and certainly by the end of this conference, I hope together we come up for a solution. And before I offend anyone in the audience, especially our Indian hosts, this is not an Indian problem. Let's be very, very clear. But also an Indian problem, especially when you want to host the Olympic Games. To introduce you a little bit to the topic and how I got involved, which is relevant. It's not about my CV, but it's how I got involved. And also, there's another message that's very, very important. And I'll tell you shortly the message after I show you these next few slides, and I'll tell you what the punchline is of these slides. I've been very interested throughout my career, since I was a young student studying exercise physiology, why in every 100 meters everyone is black? Why in the marathon, you can predict the outcome. If India does get the Olympics, I can tell you who's going to win the marathon, Ethiopian or a Kenyan. Why? Why aren't there many black swimmers? And I wish I had more time on this topic. I remember giving a talk in Jamaica one year, and there was an Indian family living in Jamaica who says, Yannis, I've heard your talk, but do you really believe if you took the Jamaican situation, you placed it in India, you'd produce great sprinters like Jamaica? Because he was alluding to Asians don't have the right genes. He was wrong. Let me prove it to you. So, and the relevance of that is stereotypical thinking. We need your athletes not only not to dope, but to believe being Asian is actually an advantage for you, not a disadvantage. Because the coaches in the room know, in the starting blocks, if you think you are the wrong ethnic group, you are the wrong genetics, go home. If your coach thinks that way, if your association thinks that way, again, go home. Anyway, that's the topic for another day. But my point is, how many Europeans do you see on the slide? And this is from Paris. And I've been doing this slide for 20 years since I've been involved. And the colors of the faces remain the same. There are no Europeans, or very few Europeans, the odd one. Here, there is actually are not genetics. How many of you in the audience, maybe the older ones in the room, do you remember a guy called Serafino Antao? Anyone? Put your hand. Come on, nobody. Wow. He was the Indian that did almost more than Usain Bolt did. Come on, guys. Who's teaching the history of Indian sport? However, he grew up in Kenya. And because he grew up in Kenya, his parents thought there's no way you can beat the Africans, so sprint. And he won. Those genes matter. Your ethnicity doesn't. But the reason I showed you this, and I'm using up too much of my introduction with the story, but it's relevant. And the conclusion, as I already mentioned to you, these phenomena are not genetics. Just choose your parents very well. That's the important thing, so you have the right genes. But the color of your skin doesn't really matter. The relevance of this, and no genetic explanation for the phenomenon. We've written many books with some great minds as to why they are great, and that's not the topic for today, but it's not genetics, it's the environment, it's socio-economics, which also means a lot of your athletes, aspiring athletes, are going to come from poor areas, like in Kenya and Ethiopia. They want a better life. And when you have two great athletes from poor families, the best in the world, having a baby, you'd expect the perfect genetics, they'll do well. They never do well, because now they're from rich family, don't have that desire. Anyway, this is what I'm a real expert on. Anti-doping, I try and learn every day. But in that journey, trying to understand the Ethiopian, Kenyan running phenomenon, I was appalled, because guess what I found? I didn't find the genetic explanation, and I found drugs. So could it be that, going back to the book that I wrote with Tim Noakes and others that the scientists in the room will know those names, they were some of my heroes in science, that we are actually looking at a pharmacological phenomenon. Imagine, it's a problem. You can see the problem. And just recently, October 2025, even the marathon record holder, and before, I think it was Wolfgang who beautifully said, these problems are not the athletes per se. The management of some of these athletes, every 1 year has a doping result. Why are they still managing? Does the sport really want to solve this? So we can come back to that during the discussion point, and in the workshop I'll do tomorrow. I love this data. This is data, and we're going to try and work out together what is the world prevalence, or in different nations, the prevalence of doping. Focus particularly on blood doping. Of course, to try and prove to you this is also not an Indian problem. And you may say, those can see clearly the slide, will see, Yannis, this is 2011. This is from today's World Athletics, the IAAF 2011. Why are you showing us old data? Because the testing for blood doping hasn't changed since then, which is one problem. 2011, some of the younger people here were just born, okay? And the test hasn't changed. So I can still show you this data. But let's look. On the left-hand side are males. On the right-hand side are the females. Look at country A, the prevalence, M2 column, which is the prevalence from the point of view of EPO, blood doping. Country A has a prevalence up to 99%. And remember, the testing hasn't changed. It's still the same test. So the federation chairs, or anyone in federations, know when you're buying the test, paying for the test, you're paying for a test that's still the same then. Were 99% of athletes caught? No. We'll come back to the problematic part of the test. Anyone know which country A is? Anyone? I can say which country A is because it's in the public domain. It's Russia. But I'm not going to pick on Russia, don't worry. Okay? Let's choose another country. Let's go for H. 87%. Unfortunately, I can't tell you which country it is because it's not in the public domain. Okay? If you gave me some gold coins, oh no, I'm not joking, I wouldn't do that. Okay? I can't tell you, but you can figure it out yourself what country it is. The point is, this is not a Russian problem, it's not an Indian problem, it's a global problem. And a problem that's been around for a very long time. And don't worry too much about the number, whether it's 99, 50%, 40%, whatever. What matters is the prevalence may, let's say, I'd say 50%. I'd say 20%. Detection rate is 1%. So when you're paying for these anti-doping tests, you're paying for a test that's catching almost nobody. And come back, India, you already are catching a lot of people. So that's not actually the magnitude of your problem. The problem is, if you multiply that up using this, the numbers get scary. And I'm giving a talk in a few weeks titled, What if the numbers are right? If the numbers are right, what's the point of having Olympic sport? You see why, Mike, as I said, we've got to discuss some of these things in a sacred environment. This is the biggest threat to the future of Olympic sport. Yet on day 2 of the conference, I've heard doping being mentioned maybe once or twice. Okay? It hasn't featured. You can see the problem, the threat. If I was a sponsor, would I want to give my millions to this? No way. No way. So, and throughout my life as a scientist, I've been dealing with, in sport, the cheats are usually a step ahead. And I'm always told, oh, Yannis, you're so romantic and naive. It'll always be the case. No, no, no. What we want is this. The testers need to be a few steps ahead. And India, this is your chance. This is your chance, because you have also the problem. Create this. And let organizations laugh till you say this is an illusion. We can never achieve that. And by the way, if you don't, I mentioned yesterday, the enhanced games are coming where the billionaires are backing the anti-Olympics. So if you don't wise up soon, there won't be an Olympics. Ancient Olympia will be historic, or Olympia will become a historical place only. So what are we going to do? Because I said to you, I've indicated the problem, and I probably made a lot of you depressed. But you can see I'm not depressed. And the reason is there are solutions, and I want to touch on one of them. And it relates to a paper of mine published in 2017 that no one in this room has read. And that's the sad bit, because the solution's been around for a long time and no one's reading it, okay? But I'm going to share it with you in the hope that someone here can grab it and test it out. And it all has to do, because you can't read that, I like analogies. I like pillars. And I like the number 3. Because a stool which has 3 legs is an excellent analogy for my students. We want to say to them that actually for fair future, for world-class sport, or for Indian sport, or for Greek sport, or for whatever, you need all of those 3. If you only have one, and by the way, I probably offended a few people yesterday when I said, education alone, I'll say it again, education alone will fail 100%. I'll say it again, education alone will fail 100%. And I'll prove it to you why it will. And the first leg, prevention of doping, is my sophisticated way of calling education, and you'll see why. WADA, and I sit on the highest committee of WADA, the HMRC, Health Medical Research Committee, and there's excellent material that you can read about for education. And we heard yesterday from Mikey's and others, other areas that we can learn a lot in terms of education. Myself with Olivia Raban, the head of Science and Medicine WADA, we wrote this book, which again, I don't think anyone in the room's read, but it tells you a lot of what can be done to understand the anti-doping, how to do anti-doping, how to deal with doping, etc., etc. So there's a lot of educational material from great names like Arne Lindqvist, who was the chair of the Medical Commission of the IOC many years ago. So education is going to be important, that first column. But not only education. And I think Wolfgang, and I enjoyed his lecture so much, was excellent in saying that if others are doing it, I'm going to do it. So we also need deterrence. And if I know the tests are not working, great case is Lance Armstrong, who never failed a test, never failed a test, never failed a test. He knew he wouldn't be caught because he knew the tests weren't working. Okay? Therefore, you need a deterrent. You need to be able to store the samples. Yes, the wider code allows storage, correct. But if I tell you that they store non-cells, because it's cheaper, which means that the new technologies that are coming can never go back and do. So actually, this is a deterrent? Sort of. If I told you, because imagine in 10 years' time what technology will look like, that we'll be able to catch everyone who doped 10 years ago, that's what's going to happen. Why aren't we making this biobank really work, rather than partly work? Although it still does work. You saw what happened post many games, how many athletes, sometimes athlete number 7 becomes gold medalist in the years after the Olympics. Is that what we want? We heard yesterday how bad that would be. So, I've spent 20 minutes on the first pillar. Education, deterrence, that bit. That bit that you can do without too much technology. It's informing, it's educating. And I know some experts in education are in the room, and I'm sure you do this perfectly. Perfectly. But alone, you're going to fail. You're going to fail, and you're going to fail. So, let me convince you of that. Second column. Second column is testing. Making sure that you can catch. I wouldn't say everyone is cheating, but at least 50%. Okay? At least half of them, rather than less than 1%. Okay? And so that's the history of anti-doping. Let's be fair, okay? WADA was only established 26 years ago. Just in case anyone gets offended that I'm insulting WADA, I'm not. It's a new organization, 26 years old only. It's achieved a lot of good things, and I could spend a whole lecture telling you the good things. But that's not my goal today. My goal is different. Is to tell you that on top right, the ABP, the Athlete Biological Passport, that you'll hear more about, I'm sure, over the next 2 days, that is the method used to catch blood doping, which really, really works. Works very well and works on everyone. But the test hasn't changed since 2008. So, and actually you can do the test in your home. So it's not complicated. Is there a deterrent? You test yourself every day and, oh, I'm going to be caught today, I'll hide away. It's so obvious, isn't it? You don't have to be PhD, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work this out. And I'm going to allude to what technology is required. Actually, I went over that too fast. At the bottom right, the technology that is being used to cure cancer, to cure Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, these genomic technologies, that is what we need to do, because sport for us is just as important as getting sick, isn't it? That's why we're all here. So why are we using a less good technology, going back to the 1960s, for something that is so important to all of us? Do you see the problem? I'm told it's too expensive. We'll come back to that. Too expensive, remember that. Anyway, so you understand that second pillar, and I know there are probably no geneticists in the room, so I'm not going to talk hard genetics, but I'm going to make it very simple so that everyone in this room will understand it, okay? But first you need to understand the biological passport. I'm sure everyone does, just in case you don't. Samples are collected over a period of time, maybe 6 months, you need probably 6 samples. Hematology is assessed, so things like hemoglobin, reticulocytes, which is premature red blood cells. So blood-related parameters are measured. And you can see on the left-hand side, athlete A, the values in blue over time haven't gone outside those confidence intervals. So apparently that athlete is not cheating. On B side, you see the athlete at certain points goes outside and is definitely cheating. And these are real data from a Tour de France cyclist that actually was caught because he was a dopey doper. I mean, he was stupid the way he doped. Anyone could dope and get away with it. He got caught. But I'd even argue that a first-year physiology students could make a doper, that one, look like that. So again, not rocket science. But I want you to understand this because the principle of the APP, determined by 2 good friends of mine, Sotas and Soji, is a brilliant idea. Brilliant idea. But it's still sitting in 2008. Why hasn't it modernized? Why aren't we, and you can see where I'm going with this, do measurements that really matter? And by the way, just to illustrate the problem, I already mentioned that in Kenya, where there's a problem, the managers, which keep on having doped athletes, you can read this for yourself. They've invested in the anti-doping machine as well, so they can test their own athletes, so they know if someone's going to be caught, they just don't run. But they advertise as their solution to doping. It's just don't let the athletes run and get caught. Is that the solution? And yet every few months, one of them is going to be caught, but the managers still operate. My point about this slide, I need to speed up, is the fact that you need anti-doping that is so complicated that no one can do it at home. That's the point. But we need transparency, all the things we heard before, of course, but it mustn't be easy to do at home. So, I said to you I'm going to show you how we can do it, and I could spend a lot of time on what we've done to demonstrate that using genetics and the switching off and switching on of genes, like if you use a dimmer switch in a hotel room and the light goes bright or less bright, we can examine every single gene. All of you in the room here have about 23,000 genes. So if you were to dope, some of them will go up and some of them will go down, as I'll show you. The problem is there's so many going up and down that if you try and manipulate that, you're going to kill yourself. Cannot be manipulated. And I'll show you, this is a paper we published actually now, 2016, yet nothing has done since then, and we are quite a few years ago. And just very brief, I'm trying to make the genetics easy. We took Kenyan athletes and Scottish athletes, and we gave them EPO in my laboratory. We gave them EPO, did a good baseline, gave them the drug, and then measured for 4 weeks. We collected urine, saliva, blood, you name it. Dried blood spots, everything you do, everything you need to do. And here you see the hematocrit, which is a percentage red blood cells. You've got a blood sample, you let it just stand there, the red cells go to the bottom because of gravity, the rest is water. You can see there that in Kenya, the white boxes, they start higher because they're living at altitude, 2,000 meters plus. But the gray bit is doping, not doping, sorry, giving them EPO. And you can see, by the way, that eventually the Scottish and the Kenyans come together because once they reach 50%, our ethical committee, we have to do ethical committee to do this work, doesn't allow us to go higher in case someone dies from the drug, okay? That's why it doesn't go further up. It would have. And then you can see after 4 weeks later, they're still much higher than normal. That's why the drug works. And I don't have time to present you the performance papers that we published. I hear nonsense from groups, some groups around the world saying, why bother, EPO doesn't work. Yeah, right, okay? Donkeys fly. It does work, and that's why athletes are taking it. But let me show you what happens when you inject someone with EPO and you look at every single gene, okay? So, after the first injection, 41 go up. After 2 weeks, 811 genes are altered. Try and manipulate that. After 3 weeks, there's about 390 that are standardized going up. And there's a Venn diagram of all that overlapping 41. On that side of the Kenyans, not such a big response because they're starting higher, and they overlap. For me, this is excellent replication in the two different countries. This works. In the weeks after, 4 weeks afterwards, look what happens. Again, those genes are still up, and in Kenya they're still up, and they overlap. And this was using 2010 technology, where the genetic technology was actually at the beginning. We're using gene chips that we wouldn't touch today. They're rubbish. This is pretty good. But this was rubbish technology for today's standards. Look how good this worked. And in genetics, to publish in genetics, what you need to do using another technology, you need to replicate that your findings are real. So to use another technology, that one on that side, different, completely different technology, and it demonstrated the same outcome. It worked, okay? Then you say, well, okay, Yannis, that's okay, it worked. Then why aren't we using your test to add to the biological passport? There's a problem. This is indirect. We're not measuring EPO. We're looking at the response to EPO. Could altitude, living in or going to altitude for training, produce the same genes? I could have answered this question if I had the money back in 2005, 20 years ago. But I'm given $50,000 every year on a good year. This costs money. One postdoc cost me $200,000. I get 50 every 2-3 years. So we go at a very slow rate, partly funded by my own personal salary. That's been the reason why we haven't proceeded. But that's also why I've moved from Europe to Hong Kong, because there, they do want to innovate. They do want to put money into sports science. I'll show you just now my lab, which I can tell you is second to none in the entire world. But I had to go to Hong Kong and China to do that. And already, before I spent the big bucks, I did an in silico analysis. What would happen before I start the work, because my lab is not entirely ready, it'll be ready in the next few, with the launch on the 17th of April. We did an in silico analysis. What would happen if you add EPO, ultra, and exercise? It's under review. It's about to be accepted. We've just got a few tiny loose ends to come out. And it tells you, and Wad has seen this already. I've got them to accept it before I submitted it. It's going to work. I just have to do the work now in the next weeks and months. And what does that mean? What work am I talking about? It's using the most powerful technology available to humankind. And it's genetic sequencing, which from this Nature paper back in 2007, it says, DNA sequence will become on a par with that of the microscope. The fact that only 7 or 8 million died during COVID is down to sequencing technology, because we knew how the virus was mutating. Here in India, you had a fantastic sequencing facility. And that's why the companies could change and help us with vaccines. This, transformative. How many of the anti-doping labs has this technology? None. How many of them planning to have it? None. Can you see the problem? This is what we're going to use. And my good friend, you can see here, you and Ashley from the Ashley lab, he managed to break the world record for diagnosing disease in 8 hours, ladies and gentlemen, 8 hours using this technology. You see how powerful it is, 8 hours. You don't have to wait 8 years to take away a medal. You get my point? And that is what's going to cure. Today is not about health, but we can identify who's going to get sick and who's not going to get sick, who's going to have low blood pressure being in India, and who's not going to have low blood pressure. Alexander, that was for you. My point is individual response. Who's going to benefit from the training program that the coaches are going to do? Coaches know if you give everyone the same training program, some are going to come better, some are going to remain the same, some are going to get worse. Our Olympian will agree with me, I'm sure. Not everyone benefits from the same training. Individualized response. How are we going to get that to work? Using the same technology. But I had a problem. No one wanted to pay for my work. So I got those samples I showed you before. I called my friends in Illumina in America saying, please, please, run my 50 samples. They felt sorry for me. Said, come over. I went to America, they ran my samples. I was very happy. Okay, we used their, at that time, top technology. Using the Thomas already mentioned. But that wasn't good enough. I wanted to be absolutely sure. We need replication because it's my name on the line here. I went to the very best Chinese technology, BGI. Very best. Actually, no one filmed this. They're better than Illumina, okay? And I took the same 50 samples. And I published the paper fairly recently. And I won't go through the details. It confirmed even better that we can identify those genes that are switched on with drugs. It works, ladies and gentlemen. So now what we're going to do is going to run all those biobank samples that I collected over my whole 20 years, not using almost a penny from WADA because there's no money. We can talk about, do you know, one football player being sold in Europe, a good one. The amount of money for that one football player, one, is the entire WADA research funding since its inception. Don't laugh. You're laughing, I know. You should be crying. How are we going to do the work? Can you see why doping is in a crisis? And please don't say things are okay. They're not okay. And in my lab, I say coming soon. We're days away. Please come and visit us. On the 7th of April is our launch. Okay? That is what it's going to look like. And some of you may recognize the wall from Ollie House in Paris. Any Olympian signed that wall? Well, the wall now is in my lab. I brought it back from Paris. And there's another wall on that side. But more importantly is the lab. State of the art. That sequencer there is the most powerful sequencer in the world. For what? For sports science, sports medicine, anti-doping. Contribution from WADA, IOC. Okay. And you want to see my robot? My robot's going to do everything because a lot of testing fails because of human error. We make mistakes, ladies and gentlemen. Machines don't, if you plan them well. So PhD students forget, we don't need you anymore. We've got robots. Actually, not true. We need you too. But you can see our robot is going to do everything. Removing human error, which is fantastic. And also we can do thousands of samples every few days. To pay for this, industry is important. And the Greeks for sure in the room will know what Zanes means. These were the bronze statues in Olympia. They can only see this, I'm sure they can tell the story better than I can, that if you were a cheater, you have to have a statue of Zeus. If you were a victor, you put a statue of yourself. It's called the Wall of Shame or Fame. So we call the companies Zanes, as you can see, to try and illustrate that point, that we are going to catch everyone in the future. Talking about money, 170 million. We will hear in the next 3 weeks if we get it. I get inside information, I think we're going to get it. And if we don't, any rich people in the room pay for this. It's nothing. You solve the problem of 170 million. That's Hong Kong dollars, so it's actually 18 million US dollars. It's not big money. One football player is 200 million, remember? The team that's going to do it, some of you will know Sven Voss, Germany anti-doping lab, one of the best labs in the world. He's part of this. I have Olympians as well who are part. Daria Bratov, Olympian from Sochi, who saw athletes, known athletes cheating, beating her. So she, as a PhD student now, as an Olympian, say, no, I'm going to come up with the test myself because I have empathy. I got hurt from this. I want to solve the problem. And that's what it looks like, the platform, but don't worry about that. But we're going to be able to look at other tissues as well. Hair, nails, saliva. It's all going to come. Because we're not going to wait for the $50 from WADA or the IOC, because I'll be long dead if I wait for 50,000 every 2 years. That's why I said yesterday when I had a meeting, a group of us, Asia is where the solutions are coming, because here we know how to put money where it matters. In India, I hope you do the same. And don't worry about the details. I'm running out of time, so I've got to get to the third pillar, okay? The third pillar, not before we get to the third pillar, I just want to say that different tissues, but then we learn a lot from the International Olympic Committee. And as a member of the IOC Medal Commission, We were very pleased that last year was an important year for AI because the IOC launched its AI agenda. And those of you interested in AI in sport, please go onto the IOC website and watch the whole launch. It'll blow your mind away what's coming. And I'll play just 10 seconds of what the president then said. Voice, please. Hello? Hello? I tested this before, it was working. Let's do it again, guys. Come on, I want sound. Nope, we'll do it again. Sound, please. Okay, let's try again. Sorry about that. We did test this beforehand. You got to hear his message because it's from him. He matters more than I do.
Can help to identify athletes
AI.
and talents in every corner of the world. AI can provide more athletes with access to personalized training methods, superior sports equipment, and more individualized programs to stay fit and healthy. Beyond sporting performance, AI can revolutionize judging and refereeing, thereby strengthening fairness in sport.
Wolfgang, remember the boxing example you used? What we're doing now, and the paper's coming out in the next few weeks, we got smart mouth guards. When someone's hit, you don't even need 4 judges to agree. Just let the mouth tell you if it's been hit or not. And you can see how AI can use all this. You can see how it's been transformed. But when it comes to anti-doping, and I just showed you gene expression. Those into biomedical science must know that we have something called the multi-omics, the switching on and off of genes, your genetic predisposition, the metabolomics, the whole metabolome, the whole proteome, the epigenetics. Add AI, because it's the only way we're going to be able to read all this. You can be God. Trust me, you can be God. And that's going to happen. But it's going to help us cure diseases. But it's going to help us do the same to anti-doping if we can think out of the box and not think 1960. Those of you in the anti-doping organization will know. What was the big in the last 5 years game-changing announcement by WADA? What was it? Who remembers? The big announcement was game-changing. I'll help you. Dried blood spots. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if a whole blood sample, 4 milliliters, catches nobody, how is a little tiny blob of that put on a piece of paper going to work? And the older people, even older than me, will remember 1960 Guthrie swabs. That's what it was. So the game changes. Instead of going forward, we're going back, 1960. Anyway, we'll need AI. And that's exactly what we're doing. The most sophisticated computing is going to be used to let us learn how people are cheating. But then there comes to another problem we have in the anti-doping world. We're not allowed to use real samples. But in my lab, I can't give you 50 drugs. Ethically, I cannot do it. Maybe the enhanced games could help us. Give us those samples of the drugs that they are giving known, and I promise you, with 170 million, AI, 3 years, before your games, we can solve this problem. But there needs to be a willpower and someone to listen to me and not say the professor is crazy. And later on my third pillar, I'll show you when I was also said I was crazy, and then everyone did exactly what I said, and years later, he's no crazy anymore. I'll come back to that. So, AI and Zanes, we sort of talk about. Okay, because of time, I've got to speak about the third pillar, which for the coaches in this room, and for that criticism that we saw before, remember that criticism? We need medals, or you need medals. The third pillar is about medals. Remember I said you need all 3 pillars. It's how do we use the very best science and technology and knowledge to prepare athletes properly, individualized response, because I can tell you, athletes today, even the most sophisticated places in the world, the average of the excellent athletes will do well. But everyone gets given roughly the same program, or has a failure in the Olympic Games to learn what to do best at the next 4 years Olympics. But with new technologies, we can really enhance performance, understand performance. And that brings me to the third pillar. Because years ago, when I found the Kenyans and Ethiopians doping, I couldn't convince them to stop doing it. They said, Yannis, we have to take drugs because everyone takes drugs, and we have to keep on winning because we've got to feed our families. Give us a reason to stop taking drugs. Education, did it work? The guy's got to send money home. Holding the Bible in the hand is not going to help, I'm sorry. They want to win. So what did I do? I came up with this idea where I was thought crazy. And Mikey will remember, I gave a talk in Athens when you had the different position in the Athens Marathon, saying, let's use the flame in marathon to make it meaningful. But everyone said, Yannis, you're going to try and break the 2-hour barrier without drugs? Are you insane? That is exactly what I was told. But to jump forward, it became a $1 billion race to break the 2-hour barrier. I tried to demonstrate that we can beat the cheaters, but the system is so powerful, and that's where the big problem lies, that the apparel industry, and I'm not going to blame particular companies, don't worry about that slide. Well, we'll come back to that, okay? Actually, let me come back to the slide. Let's use the slide. The apparel industry took over these projects, and you will see just now what they did in terms of launching the super shoes that you would have heard of, but using super shoes, but also keeping the doping going on. Hence, if you want to go to the Olympic Games, you have to run a marathon 9:22 to be competitive. But we'll come back to that. The point of that third pillar is to use sports science, and I know there's some sports science in this room. And I'm just hand-picking some things. Caffeine works. Measuring hemoglobin mass and using altitude works. You can see 1 to 8%. You can see 22%. You can also see here using other approaches, using beetroot juice and dietary nitrates, 16%. Sports science has tools that can work. If you put them together, using the best technology, you can strengthen that third pillar. And that's what we wanted to do. And this is actually when I was told I was crazy, when would the 2-hour marathon be broken? And if you left athletes with you using technology, you could break it by 2020. And if you left the athletes on their own routes, their own ways, it'll take until 2035 to break that record. And so we started that project to try and convince, and I responded to WIDA, I got WIDA involved, saying let's try to demonstrate it with science and technology and the 3 pillars we can get it to work. And there's the sub-2 as we launched it, different work packages, but the most important was the anti-doping one. Olivier de Haan, some of you will know, from the Dutch Anti-Doping Authority, where we're doing WIDA Plus, because WIDA didn't work. So we did WIDA Plus to ensure that our athletes, when they did break the 2-hour barrier, would not be cheating. That was the idea. And I don't have time to spend on the 2-hour marathon, because that's quite a sore point. I lost over $100 million personally, which I could have put into anti-doping. But you can read that in the New York Times. It became the best series in the New York Times back in, I think, 2016. How we wanted to make sport clean, thinking out of the box. Instead, as I say, the apparel industry took that idea, morphed it into the biggest sale of shoes in the world. Then the other shoe companies took over. They did run a marathon in under 2 hours. Remember this? Actually, Elliot was going to be my first athlete.
When I crossed the finishing line last year
Listen
in
to Elliot, sorry.
Vienna, Clio's 159 challenge, knowing that I broke the 2-hour barrier, I was really happy. In my mind, the inspiration was actually my goal number 1, that I will inspire somebody in the whole world, that no human is limited. And
I'll stop there very quickly. Watch, there's a whole documentary about this, and you'll hear my comments if you watch the documentary. But he had many individuals who helped him do it. And by the way, as I was saying, at the event that Mike has invited me in Athens, we were at the time giving Elliot an award in Athens, and I recruited him that day to run the proper sub-2 marathon project. But then Nike jumped in, and clearly I don't have the resources that Nike had, and they did their own project, which they swear was their idea. Yeah, right, okay? But anyway, it doesn't matter about that, who owns the idea. But the problem is, a lot of those athletes, one at a time, get caught doping. There's one, there's another. You get my point. So what they did is they used doping and the shoes and everything else that they use on the day, but it didn't break the 2-hour marathon barrier. They ran the distance in under 2 hours. That can still happen, but that's not the point about whether it's a marathon, whether it's the half marathon, whether it's high jump, whether it's whatever. The idea was to show that the third pillar can work, but you need all 3 of those pillars to get the whole thing to work. And I talk about the non-original sub-2 project as a broken stool. You get the point. But there's also other innovations. I know that some of you in the audience have come to talk to me about nutrition. And we wrote this paper together with Gatorade, one of the biggest companies in sports nutrition, owned by PepsiCo. We wrote this new opportunities, and those of you in nutrition know the history. But we also, thanks to the Sub2 project, designed a sports drink that's got encapsulated carbohydrate, releases when you want to, and some of you may know it. It's called Morton, and you can see Yannis Pitsiladis, one of our first Sub2, the original project athletes, beating Wilson Kipson in the back, wearing the super shoes, so we also eventually used the super shoes. But in that drink, he's got encapsulated carbohydrate. We went up to 30% carbohydrate to really give carbohydrate without any GI disturbances. My point is innovation. And there's a lot of innovation one can do for that third pillar. Have a strong sports science, sports medicine, look after those athletes. And use real-time technology, which is the last chapter. And by the way, for your games to work, if you get them, if you have to do them in the summer, you have to use technology to keep athletes safe. And that brings to the real-time issue, because that's the way sport's going to look like by the time you get the games. It's going to be very, very hot. Hotter than it is now. And coaches, football is not going to look like it looks today. There's no way 11 players can play football for 90 minutes. It's not going to happen. You need to have many changes of players coming in and out. The coaches are going to be watching the response of the athletes using some kind of display. But COVID accelerated this BBC's version of what's coming. And in my lab, we developed this technology, thanks to COVID, because we had to treat our athletes in the Tokyo Olympics. We couldn't go close to the athletes. So to develop this technology, I haven't got time to go through it, but I'm just trying to tell you that third pillar could be extremely powerful. And we've published many papers showing this works, and from here I go to Milano Cortina Olympics to understand what happens to athletes in the sliding sports to their heads using some of this technology. And just to show you how it works, this is actually the Tokyo Olympics. Athletes are running, but look at the bottom, the metrics live. So you can tell who's going to collapse before they collapse. My point of this is not to say wow, and let's get to the end of the race. You can see 40.2 degrees core temperature. We could get that live and say there's going to be a problem. And we're doing that already in view of the LA games. So again, I would say if you, in your bid, say you're going to use the very best technology to keep athletes safe, the officials, etc., use technology. Because in sports science, what we really want as academic researchers, and we are at a university, by the way, this is not the Olympic Committee, this is a university. I'm a university professor. In academia, scientific validation of best practice gets implemented, and then that goes back to make us decide what we need to do and do it better. That is what we need for that third pillar. So, I want there to be times for questions. So, I said I've got two slides, the only two I want you to remember. The first one I showed you, which is the problem that ChatGPT developed slide. And this is going to be my next one, or almost my next one. I want us to think out of the box. This is a picture of out of the box, okay? And my question to all of you is, for your games, try to forget the current World Anti-Doping Program and existing rules for a minute. If that didn't exist today, but you would like to run a drug-free sport involving a group of eager young athletes, because the young athletes is what you want now, not the ones that have been doping. What would you do to maximize the chance of keeping them free of doping? What would you do? If you go and send them out to train with the older athletes who are doping, they're going to dope. So what are you going to do? What's your solution? That's your solution. Thank you very much. I said I'll be provocative, so there'll be a lot of questions.
Thank you, Professor Yannis. I think we should now start with question answers.
Our Olympian. Can I stand up as well? I don't work very well sitting on my bum.
It's a very wonderful lecture. We are truly enlightened. So India is bidding for 2036 Olympics. We are supposed to produce champions now. And champions are produced based on their genetic endowment, conducive environment,
For sure.
then specialized training.
For sure.
what is wrong with the Indian genetics or Indian training? Whether genes are good or training is not up to the mark or training is up to the mark, we are genetically weak because India has faced famines for centuries together. Our genes have become weaker.
No.
Now,
No.
I want to learn because you are the expert. So India has to produce champions, world beaters. How we can do it? Whether genetically we have to improve or training will have to improve and provide more incentives to the players. What is your opinion on that?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Genetically, everyone in this room is 99.9% the same as our Olympian. Even me. I'm 99% similar to you genetically. But that small percent makes a huge difference. Our genes over the last, I'd even go as far as 100,000 years, so it's a long time, well before the Olympics were even thought about, hasn't changed much. There's some changes. Clearly there's what's called epigenetics, which is the interaction between the genes and the environment. But basically, any nation in the world, if they don't succeed in sport, or in business, or in music, or in all the things that require talent, okay, it's not your genes, because we're all too similar. But it's how do you in a population, I showed you that one slide, it's how do you in a room like this, or if you're a football scout, how do you identify who's going to be the next Ronaldo? If we do the research properly, you could do that. And that's the quest, how do you do that? And go and Google now, you'll find hundreds of companies, even in India, selling you genetic testing, and none of them work, they're gimmicks. But it doesn't mean that they don't work because the science is not right, they haven't done any science. They're commercializing science such as 10 years, anyway, to get to the point that you're saying, you need to identify genetic talent, and I think you're already somewhat doing that from what I heard, and Australia did that prior to the Sydney Olympics. They had a program called Sports Search, where they had all the kids at school doing stuff, and the kids that are good at things are probably the right genetics. You don't even need to discover if they've got the right genes. You can do the phenotype testing and find that out. So it's not genetics. That's why I spent time in those first slides saying, don't listen to anyone that says Asians can't run or jump, or whites can't run and jump. It's socioeconomics, and maybe next time I can come and give you a talk about why, and I'll show you all the evidence. So you became an Olympian, my good friend. Why? Because you had the right genes for your sport. Okay? Cricket, hockey, sorry. That is what you were good at. It doesn't mean your kids are going to be good at that because you change with your wife, okay, or their mother. So, but you had the right genes for that. But they didn't do genetic testing to find that out. It's because you played to the system and they found you out. So genetics are not your problem. And then going to the training bit, again, are there that many secrets about training? We roughly know how to train. It's doing the metrics right and having the money support, etc., and the right people to nurture those individuals from a young age. We heard yesterday how, from the coach who could tell us more, about how problematic some of the systems are in India. The programming of the athletes, stuff that you'll talk about, I'm sure, in your talk, things that you can correct. But it's not genetics. And the problems you face in terms of nurturing your talent, identifying, every country has. Every single country has. But I showed you, and this wasn't futuristic, I'm not saying in 50 years we can do this, we can do this now. It's just sport, although it's big business, we talk about being massive business, sports science, can I tell you, is dying as a discipline. It's almost dead. I left the UK, I went to the UK in the 1990s because the UK was the mecca of sports science. And a lot of the top sports science were in Australia. Australia, it's long dead. Everyone in Australia now and in the UK have become diabetologists. We are experts now in diabetes and obesity, why we get fat. And actually my universities don't want me to do this stuff. They want me to do why people get fat, because that's where the money is. So can you see? Because there's no money in sports science. So there's other issues there. So what I'm saying to you, to get to a kind of conclusion, thanks for that question, is use these games to rebrand not the whole nurturing and care of athletes and getting the world to move, a combination of all of these things. Because the future of humankind is not in a good place. And sport is one of our ways out of it. And putting millions of billions of money into Saudi Arabia for esports is not the solution. They may give us money now, but it's our death tomorrow, and I'm not anti-Saudi Arabia, I'm not anti-e-games either. Anyway, I'm jumping too further down the line. I'm sure there's other questions.
Professor Yannis, thank you so much for a very inspiring presentation. I like your image on the Tom and Jerry, the cat trying to catch up with the mice, which in the movies never happens, right?
Yep.
I think I read research some time ago. They asked American students or professional athletes if the chance of getting caught in doping, will you do it or not? The majority answered yes. And why? Because of money, fame, etc., benefits. Payoff is still positive, right? So my question to you is that, in your view, it's not very clear. Do you think we will be able to eliminate doping totally, or are we gonna more in an environment we're gonna reduce it to a more, if you can say, acceptable level?
And I urge all of you to read the paper that is being referred to. I'll get the dates wrong, and I even forget the name of the dilemma. It's got a name. Forgive me for not remembering the name. I think it was the 1980s when that question was asked. And indeed, you're right. Almost everyone said, even if I die, I'm going to do it. But what you may know is there was a revision of that data where a new publication came in the BJSM a few years ago where they asked the same question, but now, not 1980s, and it's not the same. Athletes don't want to die nowadays. They don't want to die. You know, they want care. They want to be looked after. So that dilemma, I don't forget the name, but tomorrow in my workshop, I'll actually show you that new data published in BJSM. Athletes don't want to die. You know, because now it's business more. It's not romantic anymore. So the numbers are very different to then. So, but your question is bigger than that example that you're using. Is can we eradicate? No, we can't eradicate it. But what I would like to see is having competition that has meaning. Because now, I was with someone yesterday or the day before here in India where we talked about some great performance. I can't remember, it was one of you in the room, because I remember someone here who said, yeah, that can't be real, what that athlete achieved. But there's no evidence that the person's doped. Because the performance was remarkable, we conclude he must have cheated. Isn't that a shame? You want to watch sport, and actually the previous head of WADA, Dick Pounds, IORC member as well, you remember? He said something which is very provocative as well. You know, if the sport I'm watching is not real, I'm going to misquote him here, then why would I watch? Why would I sponsor this? I will walk away from sport in a second. Now, I've totally misquoted him. I'm getting Alzheimer's a bit, so I'm forgetting about these things, but that's what he said, and he's right. And that's why a lot of the big sponsors are leaving. They want their brand to be clean. So, the point that you said is, I'm not that naive. Human nature, we are amazing in finding ways to go like this, and I think it was one of the previous talks that showed how ingenious humans are. But we're at a different stage of our evolution from the point of view of what we're generating. Our technologies are so complex that I stand up saying I'm an expert on all the stuff I showed you. I'm not. It's just too complicated. I need 20 people around me every day to help me understand my own work. It's so complicated. But that's where sport has to modernize and say, coaches in the room, you can't work by yourself. The Sub2 project, we have coaches, climatologists, engineers, physicists, biomechanists, we're all these people, and we're going to smash the 2-hour barrier, not break it, we're going to smash it. But eventually they ran under 2 hours using super shoes with springs. Okay, wow, innovation. I could have used that as well. So it's not 100%, but we can do much, much better to the extent that our children and their children can participate in a sport where we can believe the outcome. And if it doesn't happen, I said to you, now with the enhanced games, and those of you who don't know about the enhanced games, please go and read up about it. It's happening in May, and it's been sponsored by, I said, the billionaires who want to live to 150 years old. It's got nothing to do with sport. It's purely a way of making us live longer. As if you want to live to 150. You know, who wants to live at 150 but you can't do anything? But anyway, they want to genetically engineer a human race. Is that what we want to do? Sport, wake up. It's allowed the enhanced games. like in ancient Greece, and Mike will tell you the history better than I can, then in ancient Greece, what happened to the Olympic Games? It ended because of corruption and the spectacle. It became fighting the lions was more exciting. Like now the enhanced games. Let's make it exciting. It kills sport. So we have to rebrand sport. Therefore, use your games. You're an ancient population. Your history is incredible. You are the biggest population in the world. Say, no, we're going to do it this way. We want to be the light of the world. I wish my country was as powerful as yours, Greece. And I saw today when Wilka presented, we're the top for doing bad things from your slide, Wolfgang. You know, the first slide you put in, Greece was number 1. Denmark was in terms of corruption. Anyway, other questions?
No, Professor.
We have another session for Professor Yannis tomorrow, so I think we should move forward now.
One question, last question. Professor, I have a question. You showed in the first slide that India is leading in the doping. It is very shameful for us also, and for every country. And it might be because of the punishment which players or coaches are getting is it's negligible. Is it what is your opinion that whether they should get the strict punishment or something like that, that they should not dare to do the doping, because 3 years ban or 5 years ban is nothing like that for them.
Thank you.
Right.
Just briefly, but I can talk about it tomorrow, but a very brief question in case you don't come to my workshop tomorrow. You spot on, and something else I'm doing in my lab, which I don't have time to talk about, is we're looking at what's called the muscle memory. Can you have permanent effects of taking a drug? Because if you can, in a court of law, you can ban someone for life, and then that will be a deterrent. Now, if you look at the Rio Olympics, I can't remember the numbers, at least 32 or 40 athletes that had been sanctioned and had stopped sport for a few years and came back and won medals. About 30 or something athletes, which means that it's ludicrous. Actually, it's like we go back to Wolfgang's presentation. Catch me, it's okay, I'll go out for 4 years and I'll come back again. You know? But if our work and others are doing the muscle memory, where we're looking, because in a mouse, if you give a drug to a mouse, like testosterone or whatever, you see that when you stop taking the drug, you still get the benefit of the drug, the equivalent to humans years later. So in the court of law, we can demonstrate that that's game change, because the deterrents now are severe, but not that severe. And I think you're alluding along that way. Currently, you can come back from it and be very successful. The point is we can make the life bans, and that's part of the solution when I say the three pillars. Testing, the first pillar, also life bans. But you need to have the science to demonstrate that, and we're close to doing that. So far, our data is showing 100% of those who are taking drugs, when they stop taking it, we are showing what we call minuclear numbers still being maintained, which tells us that the muscle memory mechanism may work in humans. It certainly works in mice, but mice don't compete in the Olympics. So watch that space. Once we can do that, it makes the deterrence even much, much stronger. We can talk about it in the workshop.
We'll have last question by
Oh, no. Okay.
Ankush sir.
So I'll try and keep my answers short. I know I get blabbling on sometimes.
Yeah, it's excellent presentation,
Thank you.
full of energy. Really appreciate that.
It's your Indian
I
food.
I just have 2 comments. One about the book you said about with Oliver Rabin and yourself. It's an excellent book. Of course, we
thank
have
you.
read it.
Thank you.
So I would like to say that it's not something we have read it. It's part of our department in Anti-Doping Lab, Qatar. Secondly, about the gene sequencer you said, is any of the anti-doping lab has? Yes, we have antidote. In ADLQ, that gene sequencer is there. And the future is definitely of genomics, metabolomics, which we are doing, like the future is. I have just one simple, like, we know it's the future for how many drugs? Like for EPO, for growth hormone, for rest of the drugs. 95% of the drugs in the prohibited list are still analyzed by other methods where we are improving on to the limit of detections, and WADA is coming with lot of things in terms of minimum reporting levels. So I mean to say, the effort done till now, we have worked in the era of when IOC was responsible, then to when WADA is responsible to now. So there are, like I was part of Rio Olympics when gene doping was started. Of course, they didn't do anything in that due to, but now it is introduced. From Tokyo Olympics onwards, it is introduced as part. But what percentage can be detected in addition to what we are doing till now?
I mean, there's a lot there to unpack, but I'll just say two quick things, because I agree with everything you said there. Before we start, I said I'm going to be a little bit extreme today, just to get you going, okay? So if I said no lab had it, I was being facetious. The point is no one is using genetic sequencing for the purposes I was referring to, which is what they should be. They're looking at gene doping. And gene doping at the moment is, for me, a red herring. Why do gene doping, which will probably kill you, even using Casper-Kristna and whatever, if you can use normal doping and not be caught? So I was being a bit facetious. But in terms of the other point that you made, you're right. And I said to you before, I can give a whole lecture on all the good things WADA has done. They can now detect in the labs, you talk about a droplet of blood in a whole swimming pool. I'm not talking about there haven't been developments. They can catch what's in the body. What they can't do, and again, a good example is Lance Armstrong. What did he take that was never caught? Testosterone, cortisone, growth hormone, EPO. Those 5 that you mentioned that they can't be detected are the ones the athletes are taking. So I would even argue, almost the list is too, and I sat on the list committee for 5 years. That list is so complicated, you need a PhD to understand it. Let's focus on the ones that really matter, you know, and make sure we can catch those who take those particular drugs. So I think we're saying the same thing. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I now request Dr. Kalpesh Bandra, Pro Vice Chancellor, Rashtra Raksha University, to kindly come to the stage to felicitate Professor Yannis.